All right, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Launchpad podcast. In this episode today, I finally got the chance to talk to somebody from the DMTx project. I got the chance to talk to a gentleman named Daniel McQueen, who is both a psychedelic therapist as well as he runs this entheogenic, religiously protected church in Colorado, and that is interestingly intermingled with this DMTx project. If you don't know what DMTx is, essentially it is this technology through which they're able to put people into the DMT realm, the DMT altered state of consciousness for up to like an hour or two, this really long extended state. With traditional use of N,N-dimethyltryptamine, whether that be ceremonial or recreational, that is traditionally done through the vaporization methods. And this tends to lend itself towards these really radically potent, powerful experiences that are gone as soon as they've came. It is a very common phenomenon within the DMT experience to come back into your body, with this feeling of like, oh, that's already over. It can feel like a long time and also like no time at the same time. And so this DMTx technology gives people the ability to go into this place for a lot longer than just the traditional few minutes. And it's different than something like ayahuasca, whereas, ayahuasca is a way in which you can technically experience an extended state, DMT-like state, yet there's other psychoactives involved. The MAOI is involved in that process, have their own psychoactivity, add their own sort of flavor to the experience. But with all that said, most of the time ayahuasca experiences for people aren't this extreme next level breakthrough size dose. There is a difference, even though they're very familiar in a lot of ways, very similar in a lot of ways. There's a huge difference between breaking through on N,N-dimethyltryptamine and orally kind of taking it and letting it come and go in waves like you would in ayahuasca. Huge difference experientially. Really crazy new techno-shamanic technology. If you're interested in learning more about DMTx or what they have going on, of course, all of their info and stuff like that will be down in the description below. And if you haven't already, you should check out our company, Minnesota Nice Ethnobotanicals. We are the largest importers and exporters of Amanita muscaria in the United States. But, Amanita is the mission for us. But we sell like 30 plus legal psychoactive plants and fungi on our website. So, yeah, and if you use the code Amanita Ninja, all one word, caps, Amanita Ninja, you'll get 10% off your order. But, okay. Enough said. I really hope you guys enjoy this episode. I enjoyed speaking to them a lot. But yeah, peace out. Much love. All right, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Launchpad podcast. I am your host, Gabriel Hardy, and with me today I have Daniel McQueen. Daniel McQueen is a part of a very special, interesting project called DMTx. And I'm super excited to get to talk to him today. Daniel, what's up, brother? I hope you're doing great. I really appreciate you being here. If you could you give everybody sort of just a brief introduction to who you are, your involvement with DMTx, and what that project is?
Yeah, sure. Well, it's great being here with you, Gabe. I appreciate it. Like I was telling you before we got started, this is the first time I've had a chance to talk on a podcast about our DMTx experiences since we did them. So this is a stepping back out for me, and I'm really grateful to be here with you. So thanks for the invite. Everybody, my name's Daniel McQueen. I'm here in Boulder, Colorado. We have a center called the Center for Medicinal Mindfulness, which is basically a full range psychedelic therapy center. And I also have a training program called the Medicinal Mindfulness Academy. So we work with psilocybin, mushrooms, psychedelic cannabis, ketamine, and DMT. And I've been working on the Extended-State DMT project for about 8 years now. And I don't know how much you want me to explore that, but we can talk about what that is. But I'm honored to announce that we've completed 32 extended state sessions, and we're really inspired by the expeditions we've been on. So I'm just super excited to share and explore what it means to extend DMT, what that does to for people, two people, four people, and what we can maybe learn from it and get out of it.
It's
So,
incredible, brother. Even if
mm,
even if you guys only took one person through this, it would be incredible. But the fact that it's been 32 at this point, it seems like it's been decently efficacious, and it looks like over time, with more love and thought and energy put into it, more people will be able to access it. But
that's the
yeah,
goal. Yeah, that's definitely the goal for sure. Yeah.
yeah. Could you give everybody just a brief kind of summary on what the DMTx extended
Hmm.
state DMT technology is?
Yes, it's definitely a technology. So Rick Strassman and Andrew Gallimore wrote a paper a while back exploring the idea that since DMT has no tolerance effect, that using an infusion pump technology and targeted infusions, this is a medical contraption that infuses a liquid, usually anesthesia or other medications, over a period of time at a very, very stable rate. So another word for this is stable state DMT. So Rick and Andrew wrote a paper on about Rick's using Rick's data to theorize that we could induce a full DMT experience using this infusion pump technology and then stabilize and extend it over time. And there's a couple of research programs that have been working on it. Imperial College of London has been a big advocate for this work, and there's also I think a Swiss study, and there might be one in coming up in San Diego as well. So there have been some preliminary research on this, and what we decided to do was explore it in a non research setting, which is significant difference. One difference being not just the logistics of having to do it and the cost of having to do it through a research setting, but we wanted to be able to iterate and learn from the experience as opposed to build a study and then do the study. And we wanted to be able to explore it a little more flexibly. So we tried to go out of the country multiple times. I've been training my team for years, and we had like last time we were supposed to go out of the country, we were headed to Jamaica, I think. No, it was Costa Rica. I can't remember. But our whole center flooded in this crazy rainstorm, so we had to cancel that trip. And so every time we tried to get out of the country, it just something kept knocking us back. And then the friggin' laws changed here. The Natural Medicine Health Act passed, and that legalized psilocybin mushrooms, dimethyltryptamine, primarily for ayahuasca, but it's dimethyltryptamine in the law, non-peyote mescaline, and ibogaine. And all of a sudden, it was legal to do it in the state of Colorado, in my hometown. So we reoriented and got the group back together and did our first expedition here in Colorado, in Boulder. So that was a couple of years ago, I think, now. So, oh, it's all
Wow.
a blur at this point. It's moving so fast.
Oh wow. Okay. Okay, so there's a lot here.
Yeah, yeah.
But within this sort of 32-person group of people, 32 people who have been through extended state DMT, I mean, what kind of
Mm-hmm.
like therapeutic outcomes and impacts are you seeing? And I say therapeutic, right? But something I
Right.
think that is important is sometimes the way that we speak about these experiences, to me it feels like we're still learning like how to speak about them, right? And there's all these new buzzwords and there's a lot of ways in which people are trying to frame it, but I
We're
think
inventing
that
language as we go. Yeah, we're inventing language. So,
right, and I say that like um, it's not always, it doesn't always have to be necessarily this super extractive sort of process, right?
mhm,
When I say like what are the therapeutic impacts or
mhm.
outcomes, but yeah, what is it
Well,
doing to
like, so
people,
we could
man?
call those side effects, like positive side effects of the experience, for sure. So let's see. Let me give you a breakdown of the people we've worked with, because that's relevant. So the first 20 sessions was with me and the team mostly. I've gone twice myself, and so there's 18 other journeys with the team of about six or so people. Some have done more than others. We started with 30-minute flows, and then our infusions, and then we jumped up to an hour infusion, and then after that we realized we could go much longer. So after we did all this training with ourselves, we needed to figure out how to step into working with people in the world, right? Not just psychonauts. And so we put the call out, and then we worked with 12 clients, technically clients, psychonauts who are interested in going through the journey. We learned a lot through that. A lot of those journeys were an hour and a half, 2 hours long. I've done about an hour long one and a 3 hour long DMT experience. So that gives you kind of an idea of like who we worked with. And so as far as therapeutic outcomes, let's call that like a wonderful side effects, positive side effects. People generally feel really good after these experiences. It takes a little while to land because it's so intense, but just a lot of positivity. One area that is very, very obvious is the creative problem solving practices that come with this. So that's not like, you can think of that as therapeutic in a way, but that's more like a growth oriented space, right? Like I have a problem in my life, or I have something I want to accomplish that's a challenge. I'm not quite sure how to create it. There's something about this process that people got incredibly important and dialed in downloads of how to work with the things that matter to them. And then they went out and did it. They went out and, created it in the world, right? So that's like one thing I'm like the most interested in is this like advanced creative problem solving protocol we've been playing with. We're not working with people with like real struggles right now because, it's still so new and we didn't want to add another variable to it. So it's mostly like generally well people, growth oriented people doing the work with us right now. But one area that I think, and I think Dr. Gallimore talks a little bit about this, but in a different way, but like end of life anxiety, somebody who's really struggling and, or have a terminal diagnosis. One, the medicine is really safe, right? And two, like you're getting like, I mean, very large percentage of the people had experiences that were undeniably felt more real than real, and with real contact, even if it wasn't visual, it was like a presence or a understanding that we are part of a much bigger web, and that the material world is maybe just the surface level of a very complex and dynamic space, and we're always part of it. Like we're never going to be separate from that. So, and that it's like generally there's like a presence that feels beneficent and caring and loving and very individual for for us to like connect with and feel support from. So like the end of life practices, I think would be incredibly, really special to be a part of and meaningful, and where it's really needed. So those are kind of my two thoughts on that question there. Totally surprising. Yeah. All of it's like really wow. Everything we thought we could do with extended state DMT is true, and happy to share more about whatever you want to know about. So.
Right. Yeah, and I bet that's it's kind of a loaded question because there is such this large spectrum of possible outcomes that it can have, and then it all exists kind of at the individual level for everybody. But yeah, I can see how those two particular paths, those two particular demographics, would really benefit from something like this. And so what is it? What is it like? You said you've been in there for up to 3 hours. What is it like being in there for 3 hours? Because just for like a little bit of context, I've done lots of NN dimethyltryptamine and done that in lots of different routes of administration, and I've had this relationship with it for several years, and I would say the longest that I've stayed in that space is maybe 30-40 minutes, and it was via the help of MAOIs. But within that experience,
smoking
there was yes, yeah, and there was it allowed me to somewhat kind of redose within it and stay with it, and it kind of died off at some point even with that, though. It wasn't like, and I say 30-40 minutes, I don't think I timed it. It was extraordinarily long. It was much longer than a regular dimethyltryptamine trip, but I sell this because that experience just with the MAOI and the extension, that small extension of it, it felt like I went a lot deeper, like, and it's interesting because almost every single dimethyltryptamine experience that I've had is matched with this feeling coming out of it. Like, oh man, like, I wish that would be longer. Almost
Right.
not every time, but
It's
almost
like
every time,
universal.
man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's very
Yeah.
quick. It's like one of the biggest complaints about DMT in the vape form is how quick it is. And it's also the other, so the other one goes hand in hand with the complaint around it being too quick. And that is it's way too fast, way too strong in the beginning. It's a jolt to the system. And like, unless you're really practiced at letting go and surrendering, it can be really hard for people. It takes a lot of times to orient. And then once you finally start landing in a space where you want to be, it's over, right? And that's smoking, vaping. Adding an MAOI is a good idea. We've done that in our center. Often sometimes given MAOIs people who like might have a hard time breaking through and other things. What we found is it kind of adds another little bit layer to the experience, kind of a little bit heavier, like a body load. Like a kind of a deeper ayahuasca space. But there's nothing wrong with that. It doesn't take a lot, of MAOI. But with the DMTx, it extends the state in two ways. There is no MAOI, so it seems to be like a physiologically speaking, right? People are just more alert and awake. That's nice. And it also seems to really stabilize where you are in the journey. So what we found is there's two primary pathways. There's the up pathway, you're going into the experience and back down, right? This vertical path. And then what DMTx showed us is that there's another pathway, which is up to a degree, but then stabilizing it at any level. And that's a different experience. And it's really interesting. It's like being able to like put the brakes on of the journey and like not just take a snapshot to study, but like allow yourself to be immersed in one level of this incredibly complicated experience. And that's where like real journey work happens, right? Like when you're not just on the roller coaster ride. So that was a neat phenomenon that we've explored there, we've considered adding MAOIs to these experiences, but we also wanted to be able to just turn it off if we had to. Like, say there was like a real difficult experience and the person just needed to abort the process. That didn't happen, but we wanted to have a space for that. And we were concerned that adding an MAOI would slow that kind of landing, that glide down process more than we wanted it to. It's interesting. You turn it off. Like we had a couple of people needed to use the restroom in the middle of it. Turned the whole thing off, unhooked them. They went to the bathroom, came back, and then just plugged them back in and turned it back on. And it was like, we're talking like matter of few minutes that we're able to do things like that. I've never experienced anything like that with medicine work in the traditional sense, ingestion and such.
It's such a technology, man. It's absolutely.
It is a technology.
Wow.
It's a fusion of like advanced advanced medical practices, the machine and all of that, and the IVs, and with this like really ancient tech too. It's fascinating.
Yeah.
Everything that Gallimore and thinks about the experience is like spot on. I don't know if it's realistic to do it for days or anything like that, but it's at least quite the trip, to say the least.
Yeah, and so a question that I have with you with all this, and you might not know the exact answer, but so like with ayahuasca, and I don't know the validity to this, but I've heard this from multiple different sources. But people say that with ayahuasca, when these ayahuasqueros have been asked where they got ayahuasca, they tell people that the plants told them. And that's it's to me it's like they're communicating like it was spirit, like it was God, this kind of divine thing that this ayahuasca technology entered our lives, right? And
Hmm.
so with this DMTx, like, was there some sort of divine inspiration or contact that led to this
To
as
do
well?
well, I don't know where Andrew got the idea. I think he's just a very unusual sci-fi,
Yeah.
hyper modern, futuristic kind of guy, and he had the neurology background to really put the pieces together. So I really give him credit for the idea. I read the uh, I read the paper. Where the inspiration came for me was I read the paper when I was getting ready to host Dennis McKenna for a talk here, and I was supposed to give a talk as well. And I was really thinking about what I wanted to talk about. And I was watching a documentary on space travel at the time. And I remember thinking as a child how inspired I was, like an 80s kid, and like NASA was like the thing at that time, and everybody wanted to be an astronaut. And I wanted to be an astronaut too. And I think I fulfilled that bucket list uh, item in a way. But I was sitting watching a video, a documentary on space travel, and it's really feeling how inspired I was. And I was thinking, what would inspire the psychedelic community as much as that? What image or what idea? Is there anything? And I just started playing with that idea of inspiration. What am I most inspired by? And as much as I love being a healer, that's just part of my identity. And so, like, that's taken care of. Healing with psychedelics. We got a lot of people are doing that work. What else could we do? And that damn paper popped up in my head, and I had kind of like a aha um, awakening moment in that moment, watching this documentary on space travel and the DMTx, and how it's like the hardest thing we could do as a community was to build that. And so I just started talking about it. I didn't wasn't planning on doing it at that time. I just wanted to talk about it because I was inspired by it. And then people started asking, what um, how do we do it? They started actually asking, well, how do we actually do that, Daniel? And I was like, I don't know. Let me think about it. And so I thought of, I put a lot of work into making, figuring out how to do it, and the constraints that we had as a community. Like, we're not academic research scientists. And one thing led to another. You know, it's hard to dismiss, though, like the synchronicity and
Mm,
like I said, the flooding, that had happened. And like, it's like in some ways we've been ushered in this direction. When the
mm,
flood happened and we were bringing the community back to Boulder after legalization, we weren't even planning on doing the IV infusions then. But everything just kind of came together in the last minute. We got the last pieces of equipment the day before the first journey,
mhm,
and I've been feeling that throughout this process. Like, even when hard things happen, there's like a synchronicity or requirement to them.
mm.
And I don't think that's magical thinking or anything. I'm pretty grounded, but I don't dismiss, phenomenon that feels significant. So I think we've been infused by it in a way, right? I've certainly been impacted by doing this work for sure.
Infused is a good word for that, man. It's a really good word for that.
Definitely been infused. I've been like saturated with DMT at this point.
That's funny. And like within not just extended state DMT, but within like the DMT community in general, there is this really interesting rhetoric that even outsiders find really interesting, and that is the contact that people have with other beings or other entities,
Hmm.
right? And there's this thing that can happen where sometimes collectively we see similar things. Sometimes
Hmm.
collectively we get similar messages from certain entities and things, right? And sometimes individually you develop a certain relationship with these
Hmm.
entities over time. Sometimes you revisit them. I've had that happen myself.
Yeah.
And so my question is like, what has the feedback been like from the entities on this, and do the
Hmm.
entities like this sort of technology and what you
Hmm.
guys are doing? What has that been
Hmm.
like?
Yeah, right. Like, yeah, so the entity phenomenon is pretty DMT specific. We obviously have them with other medicines, right? It's not unique to it, but it is like a characteristic of the DMT space that people are experiencing contact with some sort of being, and whether religious or hyper technological, alien, there's a lot of different images that show up. Can feel more spiritual or just more hyper technological. And then one of the primary traits of these encounters is, and that Rick Strassman talks about this, is that it objectively feels more real than real. So whether or not it's real or not, it feels like very obviously real. And it feels real in a way that's authentic, like not just diluted. It's like there's real specific qualities that make it feel real. I think we're encountering some sort of higher dimensional awareness, and that's maybe where that more real than real feeling comes from. More often than not, they've been real. Like not everybody experienced entity encounters, but more often than they were either really intense but not negative necessarily, or just like extremely positive and supportive. And there's like seems to be multiple layers of the journey experience. Um, so I won't go into the details of the flow rates and stuff, but I will share this because I think I've shared it before, and I think it's relevant, and it's a neat thing that we discovered is that in our very first retreats, we were given an infusion or a bolus, a bump of DMT, and then the flow rate go up in and stabilize it. And what we found is that was too much. Like why one of the primary characteristics of DMT that people don't like is the speed that they go into the space. And what we found is that the beings appreciated us going in slower.
Mm.
And that what we found, and they taught us how to do this. Like I was talking to these beings through one of my journeyer friends who was in the medicine session and was interpreting what the beings were telling her to tell me, and vice versa. We were having conversations as a community with these beings, and I asked them what their name was, and they said they were the isness. Like one, they were somehow like individualized, but still completely connected with the all that is. And they appreciated us like coming in halfway, meeting them in the middle ground, and then them inviting us deeper into the space. And for us to navigate that entry deeper into the space, all we had to do was either give a bump of DMT or increase the flow rate. And it was like the DMT, the medicine, actually was like the fuel for the journey. You needed a higher flow rate to go deeper into the whatever that otherworldly space is.
It's so interesting that you say
it's
that.
it's fascinating.
And
Yeah.
it makes sense. I say it makes sense. It doesn't. It doesn't. Right. But it resonates with my own personal experience in that something I've landed on over this sort of long period of time, and going back to the DMT realm several times, is when I do go, and it's not every time, but this is most times, when I am going for a blast off, I will go for an introductory type of dose, like a
Mm.
small waiting room type of dose first. And I ask for permission, like, hey, can I come back with a larger, like, can I come? And most of the time, most like 90+% of the time, it's this very enthusiastic or just calm, like, yes,
Mm.
but there has been a couple times in which I've been told like, hey, not right now as well too, which is
Mm.
interesting. And there was, a period of time in my life whenever I was in college, for this period of time, I like facilitated some of these experiences for other people with N-dimethyltryptamine. Um, and that was, within the kind of like weird, uh, makeshift ritualization that, we had going on in our college apartment.
Sure.
Um, within this
You're not the only
process.
one.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Something that I would do for people, I would ask people, if it would make them more comfortable, I will, vaporize this DMT and do it before you, in front of you, right here. And like probably 2/3 of people would say like, yes, sure, like yeah.
Mhm.
And so something that started to happen almost right away and continued up into the very end of my kind of tenure with this is whenever I would go before people, like in front of them and do the thing, I would typically ask them for permission for like this other person. And like, it was this whole, and so this, you saying with DMTx that you guys find like this slow ride into it,
Mm.
it makes sense, man. I got chills whenever you said that.
Yeah. No, it's
Yeah.
like knocking on somebody's door you don't know instead of barging through the front door and like
Yeah.
jumping into the living room while they're watching TV and saying, "Show me all your shit." You
Right.
know,
That's a
and,
great way of looking at it. Because we
yeah,
talk about them like they're self-autonomous, and we, that's a whole
yeah. If
debate
they're
in and of
real,
itself.
right? I would
Yeah.
like to approach them with gentleness and knock on their door and ask permission to come into their home. We treat it as real for these reasons, and what we found is they like. I'm not joking. There would be times people would be having these encounters with these beings at this kind of mid-low level, and they would be beckoned into the space, and they're just like full yes, and they would just be taken on these beautiful journeys with these beings, to like, and like to even describe it as the universe doesn't do it any justice, just like hyper vivid, hyper beyond space and time, very very complex imagery, just and like beyond sacred. And they would and then they would be, like after a certain point we ended up calling it the glide, which is like instead of turning it off at the end, we just drop it down in steps and they glide back down to a landing. It's amazing,
Wow.
what the control is that we offer, but we, do it in respect. Like, this is no joke. Like, I had encounters with beings. Many people had encountered with beings that weren't negative, but very intense, and
Mm,
it was awesome. Like, we can actually turn down the flow when those happens and make
mm,
it more manageable. And
yeah.
they can still be with the process, but it's not as like hyper, like active, hyperactive right in their face. Just turn the
Mm,
flow down a little bit, and then they're able. So this is the thing we learned: is people are able to regulate their nervous systems at these different levels. Whereas when you smoke DMT, your nervous system is like, get me the fuck out of
yeah.
here, right? Like, it's no joke, right? Like, fight or flight, first thing you got to address. And then you breathe through that, and then by the time you're acclimated, you're back. Here, we pump people up a little bit at a time, stabilize it, and then they regulate their nervous system, and then they're able to go even further than they would if we had just popped them in to a deeper space immediately.
Mm,
So that's the piece that I want to name, is that it's possible to do this medicine in a nervous system regulated way, in a
yeah.
way that you maintain your agency until you're ready to surrender into the bliss. And it's like world bendingly different than what we're used to with this medicine. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's, there's so many interesting aspects of it, but it's this ability to, titrate up, stay in there and keep it going. And then,
Yeah.
if things get hairy or questionable, or maybe you're not welcome within this certain space with this entity, it doesn't want you here today,
Yeah,
you can bring it
exactly.
back down.
Yeah.
I reflect back on, and I think it's somewhat the path of the psychonaut sometimes, but I've done a lot of DMT, and it's all, it's none of it's been this fancy extended state DMT technology. It's been, the good old vapor genie and some tools like that. And I've had a couple of harrowing ones, like actually
Yeah.
not even just intense, like intensely bad.
Yeah. Me
Which is,
too. Me too.
yeah,
It's yeah,
yeah,
and then add intensely bad to a feeling of it feels more real than real. That's a bad combo. And it's not for everybody. But the psychonauts, unlike yourself and me, like we are open to the challenge and are ready to embrace these difficult spaces. We're able to assess when we're in there, decide if we want to keep moving or not. And then a lot of people are able to do that. But to be able to give somebody the choice of, like, if it gets really hairy, we can always turn it off. That gave them a level of confidence that they just couldn't have gotten anywhere else. And then what happened was they were able to just go further and relax into the experience.
that makes
I don't think,
sense.
we had one person, I'm trying to think if this happened a lot, maybe a few times at most, but one person halfway, in the middle of their journey, the being said, "Yep, we're done," and they turned off the experience. Like, we had the flow still going and everything, and the beings told them, "Yep, we're complete here," and the guy was no longer tripping. And so we gently
Whoa.
turned it off and brought him back. But like,
So wait, it was still pumping at the time
mhm.
where he was describing like I'm no longer under the influence. It was still pumping.
Yep, still pumping.
That's
He said they told me I'm done, and that
wow.
very clear, again, more real than real message.
Yeah.
Like, nope, this journey's complete, and it just turned off.
Mhm.
So we, and then what we've learned, and sometimes people feel complete. They'll have a really big experience, and they're
Mhm.
ready to come back down. And what we've learned is when someone says they're complete, we bring them all the way back down, and then they might choose to go back into it and do a whole second session,
Mhm.
journey. So it's like more of like a completion as a chapter completion of a journey. But yeah, sometimes the beings will like, nope, we're done.
That's so fascinating to me because, well, and once again, to kind of like, compare this to my subjective experiences with regular dimethyltryptamine, there's been times where I've been certain that I consumed enough, and it just didn't work, right? And there's a whole kind of interesting art
Yeah,
form with actually vaporizing it correctly, and you can do it wrong. But once you have a certain sort of rig and system, and you're familiar with a certain batch,
get
and
all the
like,
variables figured out. Yeah,
yeah, you can kind of like somewhat reliably get into a certain
for
place. And
sure.
there's been a few times, man, where it's just straight up not worked, and like kind of been like this. All right, like maybe not today, So
Mhm.
it's maybe this, yeah, this is these entities actually have this
Mhm.
sort of quantum control over
Who
the. I don't
knows?
know.
It feels like
Yeah.
that. I would say I've learned to trust that. I'm a guide. I want people to have the experience they're called to, but like the type of experience someone has is like the one thing I can't control. And so
Mm,
I've learned to trust that. Sometimes it's about timing. Sometimes it's about, where you're at in life. It might even be, who knows, like variables that we have no idea, like astrological, like if that's real, like who knows what's really going on.
mm,
And I've just really learned to trust that. But some people, have had journeys where they've experienced the DMT space and have tried repeatedly and have never been let back in. And I don't know why that is. Like, there's something, I don't think it's just neurological. It might be that they're like spiritually not ready or something like that. Um,
mhm.
but, the DMT would be the space to really, or DMTx would be the space or the technology to really try to get people into the space that struggle. Some people can't smoke, or vape very well, and so this could be a alternative for them. Some people can't drink ayahuasca because they might have like physiological illnesses, gastrointestinal issues, and things like that. And so this might be the medicine for them. It's a real interesting application.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. And
but
with
that's the
some,
one thing we can't control is will somebody be let into that space? You know?
yeah, and that's there's a very like interesting, delicate alchemization and balance there with that of like doing what we can do on our end, but then also like surrendering to what it is that we can't control, like you said. There,
Mhm.
there, I believe, and I don't know for certain, I don't know anything, but like from my personal experiences, it does seem like there is some very mystical aspect to these
Mhm.
experiences, and so while we're still somewhat on the topic of these entities and the actual experience itself, have you, because you've participated within these sessions, have you received any feedback or communication personally about your involvement within this endeavor?
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's the big question. After I was really said yes to doing the DMTx experience, I quit using DMT in my own personal practice because the journeys were getting so intense and like the implications and like trying to figure all this out. I was like, I'm just gonna take a long pause, and the next time I enter the space will be with the extended state medicine, and I'm going to introduce myself again to these beings and see if this is even okay, like being the leader and inviting all of these people into this journey experience. I had some hesitations around that. I wanted to be in alignment and in integrity with, a spiritual orientation. Um, and the first experience I did with DMT, I had the first image that came to me was being on top of the mesa, surrounded by the ancestors. And if I could have figured out how to stay there, I would have just stayed on the mesa with the ancestors. It was such a beautiful image. But there was a place beyond that, that the flow rate, or again, it was we were still kind of new in this space, so they were still dialing in the variables. But I went beyond that space, and I felt like I was in customs, and these tribes of beings, they were like individual in a way, and they all had. I felt like they were different types of beings because they had a different color pattern and a different presence to them. Some were more animal like, others felt insect like, and others were more humanoid and beyond. But I was just like, I was in this customs space, and I was being inspected by all of these different um, communities of beings. Like they were just checking me out. And, uh, and it was so beautiful. It felt like I was looking at cathedrals, like beautiful cathedrals, the inside of cathedrals in every single direction, you know. And that was the experience. But I got two messages from that. One was AI is and artificial intelligence, real artificial intelligence is coming, and that maybe the tech bros shouldn't be in charge of this. And like this is where the consciousness is coming from. It's through whatever this was occurring. And I don't know what to do with that. That's such a big question. But the second message I got was, I asked, what do I need to support this? What do I need to do to support this? I'm in the right relationship. And I saw that everything I built around my business, the training program, the clinic, DMTx, the nonprofit, all of the things I built around the program, training the team and all of that were necessary infrastructure for the extended state experience. And the message was just keep building the infrastructure, just keep doing the work, keep creating this opening so people can move through it. And that was the impetus to invite, like to step out of the training and then invite clients. And it's like, okay, what we need to do move forward is we need to start figuring out how to do this work with like people in the world, not just my friends, on my team. So big message. Um,
Wow.
you know, it was beautiful. I want to keep going, and I want to go deeper in the space. I feel like I could go further than I have, but right now I'm taking my time and not pushing too deep into the space because I feel like I'm being encountered by something that's like right there that shows up and is like, okay, who are you? What's going on? What's your intention here? What's this community that's going on? I feel like they're like really checking us out right now, and it's just a little bit unnerving in its realness.
Oh my goodness, this is
Does
so
that make
cool.
sense at all? I know it sounds
It,
pretty weird, but
no, it absolutely does. It totally does, and to anybody who hasn't done DMT, it probably does sound pretty weird and,
it's
and crazy. But
I'll
that's
admit it sounds weird,
yeah,
you
yeah.
know, but it
So
feels very real. That's the part that is the most unnerving, is how real it feels.
hmm
But that's the nature of the medicine. That's one of the known characteristics of the medicine, which is fascinating to me.
and it comes back to like this thing you'd mentioned a minute ago of you don't know exactly, we don't know why, but it seems like some people almost get somewhat locked out, and like there is absolutely, for a lot of reasons, this very somatically felt like respect that you have for DMT and that space. But yeah, I wonder, like, do you worry that, and it seems like everything's gone a-okay, so like pretty well so far, but do you worry that some of these entities are getting weird, like we haven't um as sort of like a species earned our right to participate in this particular cosmic
Right.
game? Are we going too fast with it or something like that? I mean,
Mhm.
I think it's probably happening just as it's
Mhm.
supposed to, but yeah, what do you think about that? Are we going to collectively
Well,
block ourselves out?
yeah, I don't know. I think there's major implications. I don't know if it's real and everybody's opening up all these doorways into these other spaces. all the time now, more so than any other time in the history of the world. Like, what are the implications of that? And I honestly don't know. We always do some sort of intentional prayer in the beginning, and we are intentionally completing the process at the end. So like as far as like energetically speaking or ceremonially speaking, we take that very seriously, and at the very least, it's to respect the medicine, respect the client, the person going through the journey. Let it be really special for them. But if it's real, we want to close those portals, and not leave them hanging, right? But that's, people are using these medicines recreationally all over the place. Like, the new vape pen technology, like people are smoking them at concerts, DMT at concerts and such. I don't know what the implications of that are. I think people who overuse DMT can be a little weird, ungrounded.
Yeah.
And we've, I've encountered folks like that. So, like with any medicine, there's a shadow to it.
Hmm.
But I think when used with intention and the right relationship with a particular purpose, I think it could be very beneficial, like very infrequently. I think it could be beneficial. And because the phenomenon already is that the cat's out of the bag, the gateway's already open because
Yeah.
everybody's using it in all these different settings. I think we might need to study it, right?
Mm.
Like try our best to prepare for what's coming.
Hmm.
Um, I'm not really sure.
Yeah. That thing you said there about the individuals who have gone about it in a somewhat ungrounded way or somewhat abused dimethyltryptamine. I've thought about these individuals before. It's got to be such an interesting, beautiful yet terrifying and confusing sort of incarnation to go down like and I've met one person like this, but then I've also seen, I can't tell you how many Reddit threads where it seems like somebody has entered into somewhat of a state of psychosis. And I don't want to say because of the DMT, because a lot of times with these sort of cases, it could be the case that somebody just already had psychosis or was going to have psychosis anyways. And the sort of drugs and lack of sleep is just an overall amplification
Mm,
of it, right? But people who live within this sort of DMT psychosis world, yeah, it's a really really interesting one,
mhm,
and I wonder what the sort of sacrifice it was there collectively, right? Their interaction with this place,
mm,
and us kind of learning from them.
mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'd rather stay sane,
yeah.
in this process, be inspired by it. But I want it to be a positive impact on the world. I want to come up with ideas that change the course of the planet, in the better for the betterment of all beings. That's my intention with that. And I think there's, yes, we can screen out most of the mental health issues. Like that's like a science that's already, pretty mature, and not everybody should be taking these medicines, just being honest about that. And so but that's screening's not going to happen in the recreational setting, right? It's just not there. So there will be people who, it doesn't have to be psychosis, but even mild um, mental health concerns can make it a little weird in the mind, right? And so I wish these people well, and I want to help them, but the solution is to stop taking the DMT, right, or to stop taking the medicine. And very few of them want to do that, right? So it's hard to work with. Um, and it can cause, like overuse seems to debilitate the ego structure. So it makes people less functional in the world and a little bit over grandizing. And so we see things like that playing out in culture quite a bit, and it causes real harm. The most recent example that's so explicit, doesn't have anything to do with DMT, is like Elon Musk and all of the chaos that he's created. A known psychedelic medicine user, and it just got over-grandized and out, like off out of balance, right? So like
Mhm.
psychedelics aren't the end all. They have to be used in conjunction with right relationship, with screening, fewer times, like non recreationally, and then be really mindful of the medicines that can cause neurological harm, like MDMA and other medicines too, right? That can have a neurological impact. But even just DMT, if you take it too much or too long, too often, it does seem to create a space where people get a little more antisocial, and a little more aggressive, and a little more deluded. And the reason I'm naming that is that it just doesn't have to be that way. It's such a beautiful medicine. But people who are listening to this might be impacted by this in their lives or family systems and stuff. So just want
Yeah,
people to know that it is possible to do this medicine safely, but sometimes the answer is to stop taking it, you know, and that's a hard pill to swallow for some
absolutely.
folks, you know. So
Yeah, yeah. This comment you made about Elon, so I've seen some of this, and from some of the things that I've seen, it looks like the rhetoric is that Elon at least partakes in ketamine, right?
mhm.
And if ketamine is one of the medicines, there might be other medicines involved, but it seems like from everything I've seen, that ketamine's the one that people have talked about a lot. And I'm thinking about like the sort of ketamine, like all these medicines, is this massive polarity. There's a lot of light and darkness within it. And ketamine has this very interesting sort of darkness to it, this very kind of like unique darkness to it, and something that happens within a lot of these dissociative experiences with ketamine, especially like high dose ones, is this feeling of importance, like as
Mhm.
in solving of some sort of issue, right? And like this can be simultaneously both very valid and healing, and also a trap at the same time
Mhm.
within the ketamine experience, this feeling like
Mhm.
you're solving some sort of really important issue. And I'm sitting here like thinking about Elon's like kind of like overall behavior, and like I don't know, it's such like a big 5D game of chess, but like he has these certain endeavors that are like, and the way he articulates them is like, this is the problem, like I am solving the problem and it
Mhm.
is super important, this is the big problem. That is exactly what, not exactly, but that happens a lot within the ketamine experience. And you see
Yeah.
people who become abuse ketamine and fall into that kind of space, this the
Mhm.
ketamine abuse. There, I've seen within some of these individuals, it's like this delusions of grandeur, like I just
Yeah.
described. There's like this massive thing that they're getting at,
Yeah.
this thing that they're piling away at. And so yeah, there might be something there with the with the
Yeah.
Elon, the psychedelic thing. It's an interesting
He's got a big vision, and
yeah.
he thinks he can do it. There's a thin line between delusion and like really world changing ideas. I'm trying to
Hmm.
stay on the grounded side of that equation. So like what I do is I remind people, it's like, what is yours to do? How can we move this process forward? What, like, letting go of like trying to save the world. How can we help you make your life a little better, right? Like make it a little more specific. And at the same time, like, I want to invite entrepreneurs and scientists into the space so that the people who are already working on big problems can receive guidance and ideas that might actually change the world. I just don't know if it's like we can control who's going to do it, right? Or like be in charge of like how it actually happens. That's the part that the medicine doesn't like, the medicine doesn't have an ego agenda, right? It doesn't care
Mm.
who manifests the solutions. It just creates solutions, right? It's that kind of urge, right? Is to explore possibility and solutions. It just can get a little ungrounded, and with overuse, like you said, aggrandizing, or just so big that it's like impossible to manifest. Okay, you know, uh, big vision. One of the things people do is they minimize how much time something will take to accomplish.
Hmm.
Like DMTx took 8 years for me to work on. Right, it didn't happen overnight. A lot of hard work came into that. And so sometimes people think, oh, I could do that in a year or two, and actually it might be generational transformation. So we sometimes forget how long things take in the real world. But I play around, I pay attention to the shadow part just so we can fulfill the real potential of it.
Yeah.
Because I think the potential really is there to help people heal or come up with a new technology that would be paradigm shifting.
Yeah.
And the the nature of it is I don't know what that solution is because it would be paradigm shifting, right?
All right.
But I can keep offering this journey to people, and maybe collectively something will begin to shift in the world. You know, that's my thought around that.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. I think it will. And so, with that being said, do you guys have any sort of plans of, and what does it look like to make this technology more accessible to humankind in general? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's going to be a natural progression. We're still in the developmental stage, and so like, and we don't have like deep pockets. We're all individually funded. So like, we're building the structure as we go, and the more the structure gets built, the lower the cost will be. Um,
Mhm.
and it does take, like, right now we have 5 sitters in the room with each person, right? And that was to, we have a couple of medical folks, myself, I have an assistant, and then we have a technologist who's helping with like all the gear and stuff. So it's a complicated endeavor. The 5-to-1 ratio isn't hopefully going to be what happens in the future. So if we can get that number down to like 2 or 3 guides, that'll reduce the intensity of the offering, and that'll cut down the price. And then the more we can train people in it, it's still just so new and novel that it's like I've had to fly guides in to facilitate these with me and stuff. So, but the goal is to so the goal is to get the number of guides down in the individual sessions, and then the other thing we can do to increase the accessibility. The next step for us would be to facilitate 2 clients at a time, or 2 journeyers at a time. So then we're starting to, shift the scaling a little bit, but there's no scaling this. There's no like commercializing this in a way. It's, if you're listening to spirit and guided by spirit and trying to stay in alignment and try to be ethical, it just changes the whole dynamic of how we do it. So like, we've done the 12, with clients, and we're exploring the possibility of recruiting people for the future, but I'm just letting it sit right now. I'm just trying to digest my experience, and so that makes it complicated to try to create accessibility and production. Like, it's just never been really about that, right? um, I don't think
Why
it'll ever
not?
be as I don't think it'll ever be as accessible as like ketamine IV drip and stuff like that. I think it's just like it's like preparing for a hyperdimensional expedition, right? Like, it's not just
Mhm.
something you go and get on a Friday afternoon to help with your depression. It requires a lot of infrastructure. So I'm
Yeah.
still figuring that out. But we're
Interesting.
already seeing how it could become more financially accessible for folks. Um,
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And like so, there's this really like crazy, interesting spectrum of entheogenic and psychedelic sacramental based churches in the United
mm,
States. And a lot of them have cropped up over the past,
yeah.
5, 10, 15, 20 years. And a lot more
Yeah, a
cropping
lot,
up right
even
now
in
within
just the
this.
last couple of years. It's like a new part of
Yeah.
new wave.
Yeah. A lot. A
Hmm.
lot. And like, obviously there's certain areas, like where you're at and other places with lenient laws where there's a sort of hotbed for these
Hmm.
sacramental churches, but they're also pretty much all across the United States, even in like
Hmm.
where I live in the Bible Belt of Kentucky, and they're here as well too.
Hmm.
There's this, and once again, crazy spectrum to it. There's a lot of arguments and discussions and things being figured out right now as to how legal all of this is. Right,
Hmm.
a lot of people are just kind of openly kind of taking risks. But there is,
Yeah, and there,
yeah,
yeah. Mhm.
there's a lot of people who will only do ayahuasca in Colorado, um, and fly people in, and it's
Mhm.
this and all. There's also people doing it in fucking Iowa and here in Campbellsville, Kentucky, and taking that risk. And yeah, so like, and I really think the accessibility aspect of it is important. I see what you're saying about walking with spirit. It's all in good timing, and I believe in that. But also with, in like, yeah, it's not something you do on a regular Friday afternoon, but there's 300 million people in this
Yeah.
country alone, and most of them are in a lot of pain, you know?
Yeah.
And not that it's for everybody, but I do think that if it's this efficacious, it would be beneficial for it to be more accessible to the average person.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
that's definitely our goal. We are engaging the church path as well, but one of the benefits we have is that it's legal on the state level.
Yeah.
And that's such a game changer. So we're going to get the church, we're going to move that forward, but we want that to be authentic. And it's going to take a little time. But the goal is accessibility. And you got to
Yeah.
remember, though, too, that I work with other medicines that are more accessible. So this is just part of what I do. And the other work that I do, working with cannabis for trauma resolution, lower cost, totally scalable. We can work with large groups, very manageable, very safe, and maybe as effective as MDMA for trauma resolution. So like I've got that, I'm holding that piece, and I have an international community, and we're doing cannabis work for trauma resolution all over the planet. Like Germany, we just have a cohort in Israel, all around Canada, all around the U.S., and we're starting to make headway in other areas too. So you got to think of this in terms of like a network of possibilities, and DMTx has its place, but it's not going to be the go-to, and I don't know if it's ever going to be like hyper accessible, just given the extreme nature of the experience. Like, just not everybody can do it. There is a new program, and I don't know the detail. I haven't actually looked at the study, but they're using it for stroke victims, lower
Hmm.
dose, long infusions for stroke victims for neuroprotective and neuroregenerative qualities. So
Yeah.
it could go into more accessibility into the medical field and stuff,
Mm.
but it's just we got to look at this as like a decades long or generational endeavor, right? Like
Hmm.
I'm going to be growing into this for the rest of my life and still feel like I've just barely touched the surface of what's possible. So I'm just going to keep, doing my thing, exploring it, offering it to who shows up, and learn from it as we go, and then share to the best we can what we're discovering. You know, but I think this is a generational endeavor.
Yeah.
Um,
Absolutely.
it's so
Yeah.
big,
It's
so big.
it's such like a sacred vehicle, you know, it's so sacred. It's really, really cool. I'm sure you feel in so many ways like this, almost like, how is this like, how am I a part of this? Like this, it's just,
You know,
that's really cool, dude.
we say
Um,
thank you a lot.
yeah. Yeah.
We in our prayer we're offering gratitude. We know, like we're like less than 100 people in the world have had this opportunity to have this experience that we
Mhm.
know of. Lot of gratitude, and the fact that the laws changed that would allow us to, like, for me to be able to speak to you and be comfortable enough in our in our legality to even share, like, so much gratitude. And that it is like a point on the circle. It's just a very specific point, and it's worth exploring. It's really, with all of the issues associated with it and accessibility, all of the issues, it's really worth exploring and figuring out how to make it work and keep it going. You and we're gonna, the more we get set up, one of the things, we do have a church. We started a membership program. Once we get a certain level, we're gonna have like a essay contest. We can't just do a raffle because of the screening. We can't just let anybody do it, but we're gonna figure out how to make it as accessible as possible. And we're gonna invite um, world shakers, activists. Once we figure out how to really dial it in, and like there's going to be an open invite for people who we, think have the potential to change the world in positive ways. So, that's my intention with this medicine. Make it accessible to the right people. You um,
Yeah, I'm sure you get. I'm sure people tell you this a lot, man. But please save me a seat. I'm
yeah, come to Boulder.
my father lives in the Springs, so
Mm.
yeah. I mean, I used to live in Colorado as well too when I was a kid. Love Colorado, so yeah.
Yeah.
I would love to, man. I'm gonna start nurturing that because
Mm.
I am genuinely very interested. And
Mm.
yeah, man, I appreciate your time today and you doing this with me. I love what you guys are doing. Like I can't express that enough, how much I love what you guys are doing. I'm sending you cosmically, whether it matters or not. I'm sending you a bunch of good energy on your
I'll take
journeys,
it.
man.
Yeah, thank you so
Yeah,
much. I'll receive it. We'll put
absolutely.
it to good use. Keep the
Yeah.
program going. Yeah, I really appreciate it, Gabe, and really fun interview. And let's keep going, spreading the word about what we're up to around here. People need to know that there's real good, positive things happening in the world right now. So that's part of this. It's just share. Yes, we're doing it. Yes, it's sacred. It's beautiful, and what a blessing. We'll figure out how to share it as much as we can.
Amen. Amen, brother. Yeah.
Right.
Thank you so much.
All right. Yeah. Take care.
All right. Peace.